My name's Mark Holloway. If you told me 5 years ago that I'd end up running from a house I thought was mine, I would have laughed. But there's something about the place on Willow Road that still keeps me awake at night. I don't talk about it much anymore. Most people just say I'm imagining things. But I know what I saw, and what I heard, and what I can't unsee every time I close my eyes. It started back in October 2011. My wife Emma and I had been saving up to buy our first home. We didn't have much money, but we wanted to get out of the city, somewhere quiet, somewhere new. We found the listing online. Two-story house, colonial style, sitting at the very end of a small road outside Mill Creek, Pennsylvania. Surrounded by trees, with a big yard, and a little white fence that had started to rot at the bottom. The price was way too good to be true. $40,000 for a property that size. But I figured maybe the owners were just desperate to sell. We didn't ask too many questions. Maybe we should have. The house was old, built sometime in the 1920s. The paint had peeled away in big patches and the porch creaked when you stepped on it. Still, Emma loved it. She said it had character. I just thought it needed a lot of work. But she smiled the whole drive up there, and that was enough for me. The realtor, a woman named Mrs. Turner, met us there. She was friendly, but she seemed eager to get the paperwork done and leave. She mentioned the last owners had moved out suddenly. Didn't say where they went. When Emma asked, was something wrong with the place? Mrs. Turner just smiled. She said, "Old houses make old noises, that's all." It sounded like a rehearsed line. By sunset, we had the keys. It felt like a fresh start. The first night was quiet. No TV, no internet yet, just the sound of the wind through the trees. We laid our mattress on the floor since the bed frame hadn't arrived. I remember staring at the ceiling fan slowly turning, its chain clicking against the light bulb every few seconds. Somewhere far below, I thought I heard a dull thump, like a door closing or maybe something heavy falling. I told myself it was just the house settling. Emma was already asleep beside me, so I tried to ignore it. But it kept happening. A single sound every few minutes. Quiet, then gone. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself I dreamed it. The next day, we started unpacking. Emma took to cleaning while I checked the basement, which Mrs. Turner said we shouldn't mess with until a plumber looked at it. I remember thinking that was a weird thing to say, but when I went down there, the smell hit me first. Damp and old, like wet metal and mold. The air was thick. The light switch didn't work, so I used my phone flashlight. Concrete floors, old paint cans, rusted tools, broken furniture covered with sheets. Nothing unusual. Until I noticed the door. At the far end of the basement was another door, heavy, wood, with a padlock on the outside. That struck me as odd. Why would anyone lock a door from the outside? I tried the lock, but it wouldn't budge. Something about it made my skin crawl, so I left it alone. When I came back upstairs, Emma was standing by the window in the kitchen, staring out at the trees. She said she thought she saw someone walking between them, but when I looked, there was no one there. I told her it was probably just a deer. She nodded, but didn't sound convinced. That night, the knocking started again. It was faint, coming from below the floor. We both heard it this time. 3 slow knocks, then silence. I told her maybe it was pipes or air pressure, but when we turned the heater off, it still happened. Knock, knock, knock. Always in groups of 3. Emma started sleeping with the lights on. I didn't blame her. A few days later, we met the neighbor, an old woman named Mrs. Collins. She lived alone across the field in a small farmhouse. She came by to drop off a basket of bread, said she likes to welcome new folks, but when I mentioned the address, the house on Willow Road, she went quiet. Her hands trembled a little. Then she said, "You should keep the lights on at night." I laughed, thinking she was joking, but she didn't laugh back. Before she left, she said something strange. "You'll hear them before you see them." Then she turned and walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing scratching sounds, faint but steady, coming from the walls near our bed. At first I thought maybe mice had gotten in, but it wasn't random. It sounded like someone lightly dragging their fingernails across the drywall. In the morning I checked, but there were no holes, no droppings, nothing. By the end of that week, Emma looked exhausted. She said she felt like someone was watching her in the shower. Once she came running out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, pale as a ghost. She said she saw a reflection behind her in the mirror, a man standing in the doorway. But when I checked, there was no one there. Still, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The bathroom mirror was fogged up, except for one part, a small handprint, right at shoulder height, too small to be either of ours. We started arguing a lot after that. She wanted to move. I told her we couldn't just pack up and leave. We'd sunk everything into the place. I told her I'd call someone to check for animals, maybe an old vent system making sounds. But deep down, I already knew that wasn't it. Because every night, the sounds got louder. And the basement door, it started to open on its own. The first night in the new house was quiet. Almost too quiet. The silence felt heavy, unnatural, like the walls themselves were listening. Daniel and Emma had finally unpacked the last box, eaten a quick dinner, and gone to bed around midnight. The old house groaned with every gust of wind, each creak echoing through the wooden halls like a whisper. Emma couldn't sleep. She lay on her side, staring at the faint outline of the ceiling, her heart beating in rhythm with the ticking of a small clock on the nightstand. It had been a long day. The move, the dust, the endless cleaning. But something about the house, didn't feel right. The air was colder here, heavier, almost damp. Around 2 a.m., Daniel stirred. He thought he heard something, a dull, distant sound. Thump. He opened his eyes, listening. Then another one. Thump, thump. Like someone walking slowly downstairs. He sat up, frowning. The house had old pipes and a strange heating system. That's what he told himself. It had to be the pipes. But the noise wasn't metallic or echoing like a pipe. It was heavier, rhythmic, measured. Footsteps. He quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Emma, though she was already awake, her eyes wide open in the dark. "Do you hear it too?" she whispered. He nodded slowly. The air felt colder the moment he stepped on the floorboards. He reached for the light switch. Nothing. The power was out. Only the pale moonlight spilled weakly through the window, painting long, crooked shadows across the hallway. He took a deep breath and made his way down the creaking stairs. Each step moaned under his weight, like the house was protesting his presence. The noise came again, from the far end of the hallway, near the basement door. The basement. They hadn't even gone down there yet. The realtor said it was just for storage, a bit dusty but solid. Now in the dark, it felt like something else entirely. Daniel reached the door and placed his hand on the handle. It was cold, icy cold. He hesitated. Then from behind him, Emma's voice, trembling, barely audible. "Danny, please don't." He turned back to her. "Probably just the wind," he said, though his throat felt dry. The handle started to move, slowly, on its own. He froze. The door creaked open, inch by inch, revealing only blackness beyond. No smell of dust, no smell of earth, just a wave of freezing air that made his skin crawl. Emma gasped. "Did you see that?" she whispered. "What?" "There, in the dark. Something moved." Daniel squinted. For a split second, he saw it too. A faint, pale outline at the bottom of the stairs. It looked like a person, small, still, watching them. He took one step forward and instantly, bang! The door slammed shut so hard the walls shook. Emma screamed. The lights flickered once, twice, and then came back on. The basement door stood shut. Nothing moved. Daniel reached for the handle again. This time it didn't budge. It was locked tight. He looked down. Right in front of the door, on the old wooden floor, was a single wet footprint. Bare, small, like a child's. Emma covered her mouth with both hands, shaking. "Danny, whose is that?" He didn't answer, because deep down he already knew the answer. It didn't belong to anyone who was still alive. The morning came gray and silent. A thin fog clung to the windows, and the air inside the house felt colder than outside. Daniel didn't say much over breakfast. Neither did Emma. Every sound, the scraping of a spoon, the creak of a chair, seemed amplified, echoing through the empty rooms. They both knew what they'd seen last night, but neither wanted to admit it out loud. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "We should check the basement." Daniel looked up. "Why?" "Because if we don't, we'll keep hearing things. I want to know what's down there." He didn't argue. He knew she was right. The fear was already inside the house. Ignoring it wouldn't make it go away. They found an old key hanging on a rusty hook near the back door. The same one the realtor had said was probably for the basement. Daniel tried it. The lock turned with a heavy click. The door creaked open slowly. A cold draft slid past them, carrying the smell of damp wood and metal. The stairs were narrow, steep, and old, so old that each step groaned and shifted as they descended. The deeper they went, the darker it got, even though Daniel carried a flashlight. The beam cut through the dust, revealing shelves stacked with jars, boxes, and old furniture covered in sheets. At the far end of the basement stood a small wooden table. On it lay something wrapped in a faded, yellowed cloth. Emma moved closer. "Don't," Daniel said, his voice low. But she didn't stop. She pulled the cloth away, revealing a box full of children's toys. Small wooden blocks, a cracked porcelain doll with missing eyes, and a faded photograph in a metal frame. It showed a family, 2 parents and a little girl. The girl looked about 6, maybe 7, pale, serious. But the strange part wasn't her face. It was the background. Behind the family, through the window of the photo, Daniel could clearly see the house. Their house. The same curtains, the same porch, except in the picture, the windows were boarded up and something dark was written across the door. Emma turned the frame around. There was handwriting on the back. It said, "We tried to leave. She won't let us." Daniel felt the hair on his arm stand up. "Who's she?" Emma whispered. He didn't answer. That's when they heard it. A faint humming sound, like a child singing far away. It came from somewhere deeper in the basement. Daniel pointed the flashlight toward the noise. In the far corner, part of the brick wall looked newer, different color, different texture. Someone had sealed it recently. The humming grew louder. Emma took a step back, trembling. "Danny, please, let's go. I don't want to..." Before she could finish, the flashlight flickered and went out. Darkness swallowed them. They stood in complete silence for a long second, until something knocked from behind the wall. 3 slow, heavy knocks. Then a whisper. It wasn't a voice they could recognize. It was soft, distant, almost inside their heads. "You shouldn't be here." Emma screamed and grabbed Daniel's arm. They ran upstairs, slamming the door behind them. The lock clicked on its own. For several minutes they stood there, shaking, breathing hard. The house was silent again. Too silent. On the kitchen table, the photograph that they had brought up from the basement was lying face down. Daniel swore he had left it on the basement floor. He turned it over. Now the little girl in the picture was no longer standing with her parents. She was standing alone. And behind her, through the window, there were now two new figures, Daniel and Emma.
That night, the wind picked up again. Cold air seeped through every crack in the house, making the walls groan. Daniel and Emma stayed in the bedroom upstairs, too scared to sleep, too tired to speak. The clock ticked. 2:47 a.m. Emma whispered, barely audible, "Danny, do you hear that?" He did. A soft dragging sound from downstairs, something heavy being pulled slowly across the floor. He grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and listened. The sound stopped. Then a faint rhythmic tapping, like someone was knocking softly from inside the walls. Emma began to cry quietly. "I told you, we shouldn't have opened that door." Daniel tried to calm her, but even his voice trembled. He walked to the bedroom door, opened it just a little, and pointed the flashlight into the dark hallway. The beam shook in his hands. At the far end of the hallway, near the stairs, something was standing. A small figure, a child, facing the wall. The flashlight flickered, and the figure was gone. Daniel slammed the door shut and locked it. They stayed there, frozen, waiting for morning. But morning never came. At least, not the way they expected. The next part of the night was a blur. Strange sounds, whispers, the door handle turning by itself. When Daniel finally opened his eyes again, the flashlight was dead, and Emma was no longer beside him. He called her name. No answer. He searched the room. Empty. The door was open now, and on the floor he saw wet footprints, bare feet, small, leading toward the stairs. He followed them. Down the stairs, through the living room, into the kitchen. Everywhere he went, the air grew colder. The refrigerator hummed softly like a distant drone. Then he saw her, Emma, standing near the basement door. Her back turned, her nightgown soaked, as if she had walked through rain. "Emma?" No response. He stepped closer. "Emma, we need to get out of here." Her voice came out quiet and flat. "She's downstairs." Daniel froze. "Who's downstairs?" "The girl," Emma said, still facing the door. "She wants me to come back." Then the basement door creaked open by itself. A wave of cold air hit him, smelling of damp soil and iron. From below, faint humming again. That same tune, a child's lullaby, off-key and broken. Emma began to walk toward the stairs. Daniel grabbed her arm. "No, stop! We're leaving!" She turned to him slowly, and that's when he saw her face. Her eyes were black, completely black. Tears of blood ran down her cheeks. Daniel stumbled back. "Emma!" But she smiled, a slow, unnatural grin that didn't belong to her. "She said you can stay too," she whispered. Then the lights went out. The next morning, a neighbor reported the front door wide open. The house was empty, no sign of the couple. The police found only muddy footprints leading from the basement to the upstairs bedroom, and a photograph lying on the floor near the stairs. It was the same photo, the family, the little girl. But now, there were 4 people in it.